5:30. Oh, the system must not be on because the mic's on.
We're not getting any sound in that room.
Yeah, 6 is a quorum. Oh yeah, that this this there's always at least one typo on this, no matter how many times they change it. We're still not on. 3, 6. Pretty usual there. Okay, now that we've got our audio issue resolved, we can get started here. Okay, welcome to the Planning Commission. Today's date is August 23rd. The Planning Commission consists of residents from each Salt Lake City district that are appointed in a manner providing balanced geographic, professional, neighborhood, and community interest representation. The Planning Commission reviews and acts on any changes to the city's general plans, small area plans, special studies, zoning ordinances, and zoning district maps. The Commission also reviews and acts on planned unit developments, conditional uses, and certain subdivisions. And we are going to go ahead and approve the minutes from our last meeting. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for August 9th.
I'll second that.
We have a motion from Commissioner Burrows and a second from Commissioner Gent. Commissioner Scheer,
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle,
Yes.
Commissioner Barry,
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows,
Yes.
Commissioner Gent,
Yes.
and the chair will vote yes. The approval of the minutes passes unanimously. As far as the report of the chair goes, the chair has nothing to report.
The vice chair has nothing to report.
Any report from the director?
Just to say that we're actively looking for commission members. Can you not hear me? No, it's on.
It's kind of faint.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. We're actively recruiting planning commission members. And so for anybody in the audience or out in TV land, if you're interested in becoming a planning commissioner, you can actually just Google Salt Lake City Planning Commission. Sorry, I don't have the address right now, but Salt Lake City Planning Commission, and that will get you to a location where you can apply. Thanks.
Thank you. It's now time for our open forum. If we have anything that anyone from the commission wants to discuss.
I just wanted to bring something up that I've been thinking about, and I don't know that it's something we can address, but as I look around at projects that have been built recently and some of the things that we have come across, I understand the housing inventory that needs to be addressed, but I really feel like we're ending up with a bunch of multi-family projects that sort of look the same. They are looking worn down after just a few years of being built. And it worries me that we are sort of pasting over any character in our city and becoming a city full of these types of developments that within, 10 years are going to be run down. We know there's not a big tendency for owners of those, particularly projects that are sold after they're developed, to invest additional money in them. And I just want to raise it as, I get the housing inventory, and I think that's really important to address, but I'd also like to see if there's a way that we can still keep some kind of character in the city that's not just quickly constructed multifamily projects that look so similar and seem to last don't seem to be aging well. So I just wanted to mention that as something maybe to put on our radar to think about how can we address this and how can we ensure that we don't just become a city full of aging, and for the most part inexpensively constructed projects. So I just thought I'd raise that tonight.
I'm going to have staff speak to that.
Yeah, very much appreciate that comment. It's something that, a lot of our zoning districts, we've been working hard at putting additional design standards in place. That includes actually things like durable material requirements so that we can try to get buildings that age well. We do not have those regulations in place for all zoning districts, but it's something that we are trying to chip away at. I think, for example, our RMF districts, residential multifamily, which is where you see quite a few smaller apartments, they do not have much in the way of design regulations with the exception of the new RMF 30 zone, and that was a big thing we hit on was getting those in place. And that's something that we're going to continue to chip away at. But it's something that, we all need to consider more as we're reviewing projects, and especially those that come to the Planning Commission, because the Planning Commission, you oftentimes have the latitude to require better product.
Thank you, that's super helpful. And I don't know about the rest of the commission, but I would be totally willing at some point to have some kind of work session where we can go over some of those things in detail and maybe respond to some of the efforts or talk about ways in which we as a commission can help with that issue. Because I think, the longer we go forward, the more chance there is that we really are going to end up as a, I don't want to say city of slums, that's a little exaggerated, but so that we can ensure we sort of maintain a character and be intentional about the character that we maintain for the city.
Mr. Chair, may I add to this? I would be extremely reluctant to impose additional costs at any time on new housing development, because we know they are directly reflected in rents. And I think the multifamily developers I've been talking to can't get anything to pencil when interest rates are 7 to 7.5%. So I'd be very reluctant to do anything that's adding to costs, including requiring more durable material.
Yeah, I completely understand that, Commissioner Gent. I just think the trade-off of ending up with a city that is poorly planned in some ways, and where we lose the character that we may already have in the city, and I just think it's a trade-off that we really want to consider carefully. I think there are also ways that developments can use more durable materials or more creative design that is not going to automatically increase the costs on those. But I think that's part of the discussion that we could maybe engage in a work session or something like that.
It doesn't look like we have anything else to discuss, so we will go ahead and move on to the regular agenda. I have a statement to read regarding public comment. Our goal is to provide a welcoming and safe environment for everyone. We ask that those in attendance adhere to a few ground rules. 1, silence or turn off your cell phones. 2, respect the person speaking and do not interrupt or do other things that could intimidate or deter others from exercising their right to be heard. Clapping, cheering, jeering, shouting, or other actions used to discourage people who have different opinions from participating will not be tolerated. People who attempt to diminish someone else's input may be removed from the room. If you wish to speak, come to the microphone once the public hearing has been opened and state your name. Members of the public will have 2 minutes to comment. Your time cannot be combined with someone else's time. Everyone will get the same amount of time to speak so that we can ensure everyone is treated equally. If you are a representative of an officially registered, recognized organization, and the item you wish to speak on is within your boundaries, within the boundaries of your organization, you will be given 5 minutes. If it is outside of your boundaries, you will be given 2 minutes. If you have a handout that you want the commission to see, you need to leave copies because they become part of the public record. When commenting, speak clearly, keep your comments on topic and brief. Questions asked during a public hearing will not be answered during the public hearing. Rather, the commission may ask the applicant or staff to answer questions after the public hearing is closed, or ask city staff to follow up with you at a later time. And with that, we will start with item number 1, Victory Heights Plan Development at approximately 1060 East, 100 South. Case number PLN PCM 2023-00365. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Clearly, I'm not Sarah, but I'm going to be in her place tonight because she's on a well-deserved vacation. So, this is a plan development request. There are 3 modifications from the zoning ordinance. The applicant is...
John?
Yes. Sorry.
You're not on the screen.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks. I was afraid you were going to tell me I wasn't talking loud enough, so thank you, Commissioner Barry. So there are 3 different items or modifications that are being requested through this. The applicant has said the project qualifies for plan development by meeting the objective of housing by providing affordable housing.
John?
Yes,
Is your light lit up on that?
it is. Do you want me to try the one next to it?
Yeah, try the other microphone.
Is this better? Like, no. Okay.
Try it again.
How about that?
That's good.
That's better? Okay. Sorry, folks. So there are 3 different things that are being requested, and we'll go into detail about them later, but the issue is density, then building height, and then yards and setbacks. Staff is recommending approval with some very limited conditions. If you look at the map, this kind of gives you a good idea what we're looking at. It's the corner of First South and 11th East. It's an existing medical office. So the project overview, the zone, the property zone split between the ARMA 45 and ARMA 30 zones. It's in the central community area, about 8.854 of an acre. There's 88 units, which are all affordable at or below 50% AMI. Different variety of unit types. There's 66 studios, 18 3-bedrooms, and 4 4-bedroom units. The exterior materials for the existing building are concrete and metal panels. Tower expansion would be brick and metal panel, and they're providing 87 parking stalls, which is exceeding the minimum required parking. So we'll be looking at the zoning ordinance standards review, so RMF 45 zoning, and then, of course, the plan development standards. So if we just look at the existing conditions, you can see on the top left and right, you can see the existing medical building. I think the one on the left kind of gives you a better image of where you'll see the newer portion, because the newer portion of the building is going to be on top of that 2-story and would match the height of the existing tower to the west. Here's just showing from the alley on the east, which the alley will not be impacted through this process. It will continue to exist and be passable. On the left picture is going to give you a good idea also when we talk about setbacks, because you can see this parking garage here is actually set back like 3.3 inches from the property line, so there's really basically no setback currently. Just in context with the site, if we look in the neighborhood, as many places in Central Community, there's a lot of different scale of development, whether you have Holy Cross Hospital, you have a single-story office building on the top picture, or Arlington Place to the east, and so there are a lot of different types of uses and scale in the neighborhood. Just existing conditions, this is just a general survey, just showing the parking areas, the building itself. If we look at the proposed site plan, you can see in the outline of blue is where the new development would be, but only on the western half would you actually see new construction. The rest would be just remodeling and reusing that existing medical office building. You will see that some of the parking structure, the top of the parking structure will actually be used for amenity space, and portion of that residential tower will go above that as well. The below parking will remain to provide parking for the development. So I'm going to go through the elevations rather quickly because the applicants are here, and I'm going to rely on them to kind of talk more about their design. And so the top one would be the north elevation, so that would be fronting on First South. The bottom should show the southern elevation. And this would just show the 2 sides, with the east portion being that street-facing side. So let's go into the modifications, kind of why we're here tonight. Somebody's phone's lost. So the plan development approval is requested for the following. The first one is density. So what we have here is the conversion of a non-conforming commercial use to a permitted residential use. So in the RMF zoning district, developments that change a non-conforming commercial use to a permitted residential use are allowed through the plan development. And by doing that, they actually become exempt from the density limitations. And I'll talk a little bit more about what would be allowed under RMF soon. The building height is seeking up to an additional 5 feet of building height. This is just to accommodate the screening of mechanical equipment. And then yards and setbacks. The applicant seeking reductions to corner side, interior side, and rear yard requirements. What you'll find though is because this building is all in the actual footprint of the existing building, that this building doesn't meet them already. And so the newer portions aren't going to meet them as well. So again, they recommend approval with conditions. So looking at the density, so as of right now, because we're looking to propose to convert to residential use, as mentioned, there's 88 units of varying different sizes. 100% of them will be for residents with rents between 25 and 50% AMI, and 10 studio units will actually be affordable at 25% AMI, which I think, as we've been discussing affordable housing a lot, that's pretty difficult to achieve and pretty rare to see. If this is to remain as RMF 45, if we look at the qualifying provisions for multifamily in this zone, you could have a total of 35 units. So here we're looking at building height. So this is a non-confined building. It wasn't always on RMF 45, but it was at in the 90s. And so that made this not complying at over 45 feet. But we can expand as long as we don't go above that height. And so that's the green line at the top of the building. That's showing the max building height was at 69 feet, 7 inches. And as we go across there, you can see that is the rooftop height. The applicants are requesting additional 5 feet, which is allowed through the plan development process. Again, that would be just for a parapet wall to help screen some mechanical equipment. You can also see that because of the grade, the height does vary from 46.5 feet on one side and about 69 feet, 7 inches on the other. So if we get into setbacks, we'll start with the corner side yards. So that would be on the right side along 11th East. There's a little purple line there that shows where the building is not meeting. And this is replacing existing stairs. So the existing stairs for the building are structurally unsound for a new residential use. And at the age of the building is probably not too shocking. So the request for the reduction of the setback is to accommodate rebuilding those existing stairs at the width that are required by building code. If we look at the interior side yards, this would be on the left side of your screen. There's, again, that purple line shows where it's not meeting the required setback of 10 feet. It's asking for a reduction to 5 foot 2 inches. So as of right now, the building is only 4 feet from the property line. So this would push it back a foot and a couple inches to be able to accommodate the exact design. And then if we look at the rear yard setback, this is from 30 feet to approximately 14 feet. And so this would be on the south, and you can see that purple line again. So it does not meet that necessarily, but as you can tell, as we went back to that parking garage is only 0.3 inches away from the property line. And so though it may not be meeting that, we do feel like that the project is providing enough of a setback that it's not intrusive to neighbors below. There's also going to be, or there is currently an alleyway that would help to push that development a little bit further away, or the massing from development to the south. If we look at just adopted master plans, staff feels that it is in compliance with adopted master plans with Plan Salt Lake, Central Community Plan, and the Housing SLC. It's providing affordable housing in an area of the city where there are fewer income and rent-restricted units. We're providing studio as well as family-sized units, removing a non-conforming land use, and also meeting Housing SLC metrics, which is seeking to provide affordable and deeply affordable units. The public process, we sent early notification to property owners within 300 feet. It was posted online in an open house. The Central Community Council discussed project and provided a letter of support with considerations. That should be in the staff report. Staff has received a number of email comments. Those are included with the staff report, or they were put in your Dropbox for those that came in this afternoon. Those that commented expressed concern about alley access easement, adequacy of parking, the proposed design, and impact of affordable units. So 2 expressed support. So again, our recommendation is for approval. We have 2 conditions that are limited. Just final approval, the plan shall be delegated to planning staff to ensure compliance with zoning standards, conditions of approval, including off-street loading, signage, lighting, and landscaping. And second, just for this, that this is an approval for the specific items discussed and identified in the staff report, and that all other applicable regulations, requirements from other cities would still apply. So that's my presentation here. I'm happy to answer any questions. I believe the applicants are here, and then they have a presentation as well when you're ready for that.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and have the applicants come up and state your names for the record, and you'll have 10 minutes.
Yeah, here. Anyone would like.
Thank you, Commission, for hearing this, and we really appreciate John stepping in and doing the presentation, and we've really appreciated working with Sarah and the rest of the staff. This particular project. My name's Jonathan Hardy, and I'm representing BCG Holdings, and I'll have Mike introduce himself.
And I'm Mike Ackley with Architecture Belgique. I'm Mike Ackley with Architecture Belgique.
Great. So we're excited to be here just to talk a little bit about our ownership group. BCG Holdings is partnering with Volunteers of America on this project in the ownership, and we also have Give Development as part of our development team, all experts in affordable housing. We're excited to be here. I think this is our second planning commission in a row. We were here with Pickle and Hyde last week, and we have another affordable project that's probably on the docket shortly here before you. So we're excited to be here to talk about affordable housing on the east side. We're very excited that we've been working with the community council in this respect, and to our utter delight when we met with them, that we've got a lot of support, and that is not always the case with affordable housing, and so very appreciative of the community support that we've received so far. We do have, this is a fully capitalized project. We do have funding housing tax credits for Utah Housing Corporation. We have the Salt Lake RDA is participating in this project, as well as the Only Walker Housing Loan Fund for the Department of Workforce Services. So we're appreciative of all those folks stepping up and making this affordable housing a reality. So yeah, I think you've heard a little bit about this, the 88 affordable units, and we wanted to put in context, this came up a little bit in community council, what those rent levels are. So the studios will rent anywhere from $409 up to $873, 3 bedrooms from $972 to $1,275, and the 4 bedrooms from $1,075 to $1,414. So well below market. We're excited to have large units, which is not always easy to do, but we're excited about having that on this project. We are very much into creating a sustainable project. The most sustainable thing we can do is try to preserve as much as what's already there. So we are utilizing a lot of the existing medical office tower. It sets up pretty nicely for a double corridor multifamily building, actually. So we're excited about that. It is Enterprise Green certified, and it is all electric to help reduce emissions and keep to what we can do with that particular building in the neighborhood. And we have a couple different views here. This is from the street side. I think you've seen some of these. Did want to note that mural in the front, that's a placeholder mural. We haven't really decided what the mural is going to be, but we want this to be a community asset. So we are working with community council. We want to kind of go through a process to decide what that mural will be and have it be reflective of the community. Part of our commitment with the Salt Lake RDA funds is to provide public art. So this is our way to do it, and we want to make it a kind of a community project, and we want to be a community asset as well. Addressing some of the issues that came up a little bit on the comments. The alleyway, there's always confusion when you look at renderings, but the alleyway is remaining the same. We are considering closing off our entry and exit into the alleyway that goes into our parking garage, and just having that open onto 100 South. So we're kind of going through that process to see if we can make it happen. But in any respects, we're keeping the alley exactly the way it is, and people will still have the access that they need to get in and out of the various rear drives that exist on some of those single families away from it. We do have professional management that will be assigned to this project. Property management is always an issue, and I know we've had some comments in that regard. We're committed to community council to make sure any and all issues are addressed promptly. They have my contact information, and we will work with them on their recommendations and how we make that happen and make sure it's a successful project all around. And one of the other things that came up when we met with the community council, and I think we're excited about this, is that keeping it at affordable levels for the community. This is an interesting qualified census tract, which means that 25%, the poverty rate is at least 25%, or 50% of the households have incomes below 60% of area median income. So this really isn't outside a lot of the income profile of what exists in that neighborhood already. With gentrification, I mean, you'll see a lot of people come in and knock buildings down, doing market rate housing. We want to make sure we're capturing, a lot of the residents of the community. We want to make sure that when we are lease up, that we're engaging with that local community and trying to make sure we're placing people there that are residents of that community, want to stay there, live there full time. So you can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is kind of the west view, and they talked a little bit about that stairwell. So it's kind of an open stairwell right now, and it's had a lot of water damage over the years. So in closing that, that's really the only modification you can see. This is really the existing building you're looking at. And we're excited to give it kind of a refresh, but maintain a lot of the character. It's a concrete building, but we can, help freshen it up and then blend it in with that new addition on the front. And if you have further questions on the design, this is why Mike's really up here, but go to the next slide, please. We did want to put in context a little bit who lives in Salt Lake's affordable housing. These are just some averages of what people make and where they fit in that profile. So, I mean, just childcare workers, EMTs, mail carriers, all those people that, live and serve in our communities, that now they can live and, be there and have affordable rents. That's the objective of doing this. So we've shown them kind of in the context of the Victory Heights apartment rent. And next slide. And last but not least, and I may be preaching to the choir here a little bit, but I know this comment comes up a lot about how high density apartments or how affordable housing affects property values. And when I was at the state running our affordable housing programs, we commissioned a study with the University of Utah about high density housing. How does it relate to property values? And we found that it's positively associated with property values, not negatively associated with it. And a lot of other studies, which is the study on the right, this more of like an urban area, but that's a typical urban profile of what happens when you have an affordable housing project go in. There's a large amount of investment, but it is either not associated at all or positively associated with property values. So I know that comes up a lot. It's probably something you hear regularly. Council people hear it. We're here to help support affordable housing in the community. Wherever we can create it, it's needed. And we're excited about this particular community. Like I say, the community's been very supportive so far that we've engaged with. But I know there may be some comments that come up like this, and we wanted to always put our policy hat on and say that we support it, and it should be supported because it doesn't diminish property values. It is essential in our neighborhoods, and it makes a vibrant community. So with that, we're open to any questions, and especially on the design, Mike will handle those.
Yeah. Anyone have any questions?
Yeah. Sorry, what's the legend for the graph on the left? What's the red line and what's the blue line?
The red line is, that is within a half a mile of high-density housing, and the line below it is outside of half a mile. So you can see that it trends. The closer you are to high-density housing, you've actually seen greater appreciation than outside of a half a mile.
Thank you.
Is this going to be permanent supported housing?
This is not a permanent supportive housing project, no. This is just income restricted housing.
Who
I-
did you say was going to manage?
Right now, we're working with Evergreen Management. And they do a lot of, give our partner on this project, they do the management of their properties along with several others.
I have a question for staff. It seems to me that we are not making a decision about increasing density on this property. That's already a decision that's already been made. They can have 88 units on this, in this space.
Well, they can as a plan development. So they still need to go through the plan development process.
Okay.
You would have to approve that. And so we'd have to prove that they obviously met the standards and met one of those objectives. And as Sarah went through those, she felt that it did meet those standards and met that objective of providing additional housing.
Okay. I thought that the density change was, like the density requirements are waived because it's changing from non-conforming to a conforming use?
Yeah, this one is a strange one. This is something that's been in the zoning ordinance for a while, and it's only been used, I think, maybe 2 other times. Normally, through the plan development process, you cannot increase density ever. You would have to change the zoning on the property to reflect a new zone that would allow that that density. However, the chapter was written specifically that if you have a non-conforming commercial uses, that if you make it into a complying use, conforming use, that you were able to waive that,
Okay.
or you are able to waive that.
And then my other question is that I'm looking forward to hearing the neighbors talk and the public comment. I want kind of a confirmation that everyone who uses the alley right now will be able to use the alley during construction, after construction. We're not changing any of the alley allocations or legal rights to it or anything like that.
No, it's a little odd because the parcel is actually split by the alley technically because
Yeah.
there's parking on one side of it and then the building on the other side. But in no way does this project, so as proposed, would not impact the alleyway.
Okay. And those carports will just stay as carports for right now?
Yeah, those are actually owned by our project. The carports, that's what's split by the alley.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll be covered parking in the future, so we're just leaving them as is.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question about the design, especially of the existing building. You said that you weren't making changes, but you're making a lot of changes. You have a cornice on the top that wasn't there. You have a lintel on the bottom above the ground floor that wasn't there. You have seemingly changed the color of everything, and also, so you've really changed the character of this building a lot. Why?
I think the biggest reason why we tried to add those features into the existing building was to help tie into the new tower that was going to be there. We did our best to not like mask what the original features were in that. We definitely talked about it as a team of what was the main character items and tried to accentuate those.
Well, the original structure is a sort of modernish looking thing. This is very postmodern looking, very, almost traditional, cornice and lintel and all of this stuff. And what about the concrete? Are you painting the concrete?
We haven't figured out what color scheme we're going to go with at this point. We do need to freshen it up. There is structural damage and things that we have to clean up on that. So trying to figure out what to do to best patch it and make it look uniform is where we're
And
at.
the metal panels are new too?
Metal panels will be new, yes.
So those are the, whatever they are, I don't know what they are right now, but they're kind of a darker brown color.
Are you talking
compared-
about the vertical fins
yes.
and that? So right now those are a precast element that are like a stone that you can see the pattern on it.
Yeah.
And we've added a metal panel to the center of that portion.
Okay, so virtually every surface of this building is going to be changed on the exterior.
I don't think it'll be changed. It'll be just cleaned up to where it is now. Like we have to keep the original elements that are there for it, but you couldn't just leave it because there's items that aren't weather tight. It's an older building that needs to be updated.
Okay, thank you.
If we have no further questions from the commission, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. We've had several cards submitted. The first one is Esther Hunter from the East Central Community Council. If you want to get up and speak, since you're from the Community Council, we'll give you 5 minutes. And remember to state your name at the start for the record.
Hi, my name is Esther Hunter. I'm chair of East Central Community Council, and I won't be long. I just first of all want to thank this whole project team for how well they have worked with us, especially Jonathan and especially Amanda, and the level of detail that they went in to make sure that things were tied in and well thought out in terms of the neighborhood. I have no personal concern that anything that comes up, whether it be during construction or the alleyway or anything, that we won't be able to work things out. I have a commitment that that will take place, and I have no concern that that won't take place. So we are very thankful. Second is just the fact that we are taking a non-conforming building and making it residential is joy to our ears, especially since it will be affordable and because it will also make room for families, which we desperately need in our area. A lot of people, we have East in our name, and that gives a wrong representation. I'm glad that Jonathan spoke of the income level of our area, because we very much are a workhorse of workforce housing in our area. It's not necessarily new, but it's a lot of existing older houses and older buildings that can be used for affordable housing, and we're very grateful that this is taking place. So thank you.
Thank you. Cindy Cromer. State your name for the record, and you've got 2 minutes.
My name is Cindy Cromer, and I have lived in this neighborhood since 1973, within a few blocks of this location. In December of 1984, the City Council adopted the East Central Neighborhood Plan. Excuse me. This is an original copy. It was the first of 12 small area plans that I've worked on. The following spring, in 1985, the City Council adopted zoning changes which made the medical clinic spawned by Holy Cross Hospital non-conforming uses. This building was one of those medical clinics. It was the largest one to become non-conforming. Over 20 medical clinics had been built in the neighborhood, resulting in the demolition of existing housing. In the 38 years since then, only 3 non-conforming sites have been redeveloped as housing, and one of those developments occurred at the expense of even more existing housing. I have some data-driven comments to make. The first one is the most important. This city cannot whoosh non-conforming uses away. It has to provide significant incentives, otherwise the non-conforming right just makes the property more valuable. The drive-throughs on the transit corridor are an example. Reparking. I've told you before, if the rent is below $800 a month, then I find that 50% of my tenants do not have a car. Above $800 a month, they all have at least one car. These tenants without cars rarely move because they've located close to work and they cannot find cheaper housing. Number 3, the conditional use and the development agreement proposed by some commenters. The public comments suggest that the use of a development agreement require an on-site manager. You do not have the authority to enter into a development agreement. You are the final decision makers, and I want to point out that even if you did have the authority, development agreements are associated with significant slowdown in the approval process. An example would be the development agreement for Western Gardens. The city cannot afford a slowdown on this project. Number 4, I think there's a huge disconnect in the colors of the existing building and the proposed tower. You do not regulate that. Hostas are stupid plants in this climate, and they do not screen utilities. And murals are not characteristic of this neighborhood at all. I don't care what the RDA says.
That's 2 minutes.
You do not regulate species or murals. Thank you.
Spencer Hogan. State your name for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Spencer Hogan. For the record, I'm all about affordable housing. For the record, I'm very concerned with what's going on with this project. I've owned the house about 200 feet from this building for over 30 years. Parking is a nightmare when school is in session, as in the University of Utah, go Utes. But a football game comes along, I have been blocked from my driveway in and out numerous times, probably from BYU fans. But parking is a huge issue there. The little side street that borders the west of this project, McClelland, parking is constantly a problem there as well. I live on Bueno Avenue. Parking is a nightmare. If they plan on getting rid of the 36 parking spaces on the outdoor unit, which is where they're planning on putting in some type of hopefully garden or something, by my count, the parking spaces inside the building, there are 76. Correct me if I'm wrong. 3 of those are blocked off by infrastructure. If, on average, by the big apartments particularly, they have 1.5 cars, there is not going to be enough parking for the automobiles for that building. I'm very concerned about that, plus the traffic congestion that already exists on occasion, mostly during game days, or if we happen to get the Olympics again. That's a big concern. There's a lot of children, animals, pets, cats, rats in the neighborhood. But it's a big concern when you see what's going on. The alleyway, people are coming and going constantly, so hopefully that is going to be continued to be in use. But my main concern is the parking and the traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Jen Colby.
I would like to remind the members of the audience to please mute and turn down your cell phones.
State your name for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Yeah, Jen Colby. I'm speaking as an individual. I live a couple blocks away, and I'm really pleased to be able to speak in favor of this redevelopment project for once. It's telling that it's a non-market and adaptive reuse to conforming project. I want to address a few things. I think it's incredibly important to see that this project is addressing needs for open space, preservation, deeply affordable housing, mobility, and specifically sustainability, which is chronically disappointing that our market rate developers claim they can't do this, but they'll put in the amenities race of pools and rec buildings and gyms and blah, 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 blah that they can afford, but they can't afford deep sustainability and long-term life cycle costing. I want to challenge Spencer a little bit. I appreciate his concerns, but parking destroys communities. And it's the failure of transportation to have done a complete street revision on First South, plus the demand of the University of Utah that needs to be addressed directly. I suggest actually reducing parking to the minimum. The average car costs $13,000 a year to own and maintain. We need more and more people to have just real choices to not own a car in our community. Car dependence is costly unfreedom that we've been trapped in thanks to decades of car propaganda and terrible planning in our urban environments. So this is incredibly critical. Again, things like we can't build to peak, that's just folly. I want to say again that this just shows that our market density at any cost mantra is failing us, and from around the country and around the world, places like Vienna and the Netherlands with their social housing are exactly what we need. Non-market housing is the only way to fill the gap and bring down costs, challenge market rate, and build real affordability. So I urge you to approve this with no additional conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Robin Crockett.
Hello, my name is Robin Crotchett. It's a pleasure to talk with you this evening. I am a little bit concerned that the density has already been decided as an issue.
Can you please speak closer to the microphone?
Oh, sure. Is that better? Please raise a hand when I've reached 2 minutes. I have no idea what's going to happen. I would like
really like almost,
okay.
Really close.
My concern tonight is not about what's on the charts. I understand that this is for affordable income. I'm very much for that. And I hate to say this, but not in my neighborhood. Our neighborhood is a tree-lined street with neighbors who know and love each other and are friends who take care of each other's cats and children, who help each other through divorces and hospital stays. And I happen to live next door to a house that is rented to students of the University of Utah. It has made my life a living hell for most of the years, even though I have personal contact with the owner of the property, and I have had to threaten to literally tear our divided driveway apart and put up a fence in order for not to have rats, not to have to hear the F word screamed, not to have animals killed and things shot out of buildings. I'm talking about things that need policing. And I fear that this building will attract more and more University of Utah students. They do not have a vested interest in this neighborhood. We do. We are continually improving our neighborhood. We are what makes Salt Lake a nice place to live. The parking is crazy on McClellan Street. Not only will you have the 88 units there, you will have their friends there. Every student will
That's
be
2
there.
minutes. Thanks.
Thank you for listening.
Morgan Galbraith. State your name for the record and you'll have 2 minutes.
My name is Morgan Charles Galbraith. I live next door on McClellan 154. And you say to bring families. How many of these are studio apartments again?
That's a question that we can address after.
58. I saw it. Right now, same thing. Parking is out of control. I can't even park in front of my own house. Cars will be there for days. And I have to call city enforcement to say, can you see if this car's abandoned? All the time. Because it's mainly people that are renting. Same thing that Robin said. Robin's my next door neighbor. I live on 154 South McClellan. And I love living there. Trees. I have a daughter. I have a family. And if stuff like this keeps coming, I'm out. All my family, I grew up in the Avs, all of them left because of the stuff like this. I mean, there's no kids on the street. My daughter and one other kid is on the street, and that's it. So this keeps happening. People with families leave. I love the city. I love living where I live. That's it.
Thank you. And no.
That was my other issue.
Okay.
Anybody check with the FAA about the helicopter that lands at Salt Lake Regional?
That's kind of out of our jurisdiction. We could have staff comment on it later. We have a card from Marilee Roniger. It does have the I wish to speak box checked, but there are comments on the bottom, so you can speak. Okay. State your name for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Marilee Roniger. I've lived on McClellan Street for over 45 years, and my daughter grew up in that neighborhood. It's a real family neighborhood, like Morgan was just saying. The thing that's concerning me is the low income housing. I would rather see this project be condominiums where people care about their housing. You know, there's the Friendship Manor is low income. There's a lot of, they're putting up apartments all over that they're calling low income housing, and they're not low income. We have them from 3rd South down to 21st South, all these apartments, and they're not low income, but they're quote unquote low income. So this is, if they would put more units in this and make it more sustainable for people to live in, they cared about it and cared about the neighborhood. What's next? Is the Moreau Center going to become low-income housing too, or even Holy Cross Hospital for that fact? Because people, you just get too many people in the neighborhood that don't care, and that's my big concern. And I was concerned about the alleyway because the alleyway is access to my garage, and right now with people that come down there and turn around all the time, and I'm glad to hear that they're going to keep that access open. But the cars and more people is the big thing for me. They could do less units and make it a beautiful place. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to give public comment? Do we have any emails that have come in the meantime? Okay. Okay, go ahead and, yeah. State your name for the record and you'll have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Chris Parker. I'm part of the application team. But
If you can speak or pick up the mic.
Good?
That's good.
Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Chris Parker. I am part of the applicant team as one of the developers. I'll let them speak to the actual development pitch, but I thought I'd speak as a resident of a mixed income, mixed unit size building, very similar to this in dimension. Across from my unit are primarily 3-bedroom apartments that house what used to be prevalent in this neighborhood and what used to be prevalent in the city's west side. The reason why we no longer have children in our communities that historically have had them is because young families that would have 4, 7, 10-year-old sons and daughters no longer can afford the housing prices in these communities. Affording a $750,000 home, especially at 7% interest rate, might cost you $5,000 a year. And so these families are not returning to these communities. If you want to see less schools close, you have to make avenues for young families that traditionally do not have the incomes appropriate to what currently is selling in this neighborhood. You have to give them a place to live. And although there are over 60 small units in this project, there are over 20 large units in this project, which would make up the entirety of one side of a street were you to lay them out end to end. These absolutely will have young families. These will have kids playing on the streets. And there's really no other way to do it other than projects like this.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, we will go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission.
Thanks so much. I appreciate hearing from the members of this neighborhood. I am sympathetic to your parking concerns, and I think the fault lies with University of Utah. It is $173 for a student parking permit on campus. I'm a faculty member there. I've been a faculty member at 4 other universities. Students don't routinely drive to campus at other universities because they don't make it feasible. So I'm sorry it's spilling over into your neighborhood. We can't address University of Utah's parking issue. There are people that can. The president of the university, Taylor Randall, is responsible for this. The trustees are responsible for this. When I've asked the people in commuter services about this problem, I've been told the trustees are worried about our poor students, that they couldn't possibly go to college if we don't make parking cheap on campus. So I really would encourage the city and your counselor, I can't remember who the counselor is this District 2? District 4? To work with the university, because it's not just a problem in your neighborhood. We have a number of neighborhoods around the city near the university that's a problem. So I'm sorry about that.
Sorry.
So I have a question for the developers. Will a university student who is an adult qualify for a low-income unit?
I'm so glad you asked that question. It is virtually impossible with our funding sources to have a household like that in our qualify for the unit. There are very hard restrictions on full-time students qualifying for Section 42 low-income housing tax credit projects.
So the answer is probably not.
Almost, there can be a student in the household, but the household would have to be like parents and their kid is a student or something like that.
All right, so we're talking about people with a family.
Yeah, we're not talking about student housing at all.
Okay, so even though you have a lot of studios, you're not expecting those to fill up with renters from the student population of the university.
No.
Thank you.
I notice if there are 68 studio units in your building, then there are 20 multi-room units, which means there could be 20 families with kids, which means if kids are missing from this neighborhood, this is where they could live. And a nice neighborhood where people get along and support each other and stuff like that is a great place for families to live. So and I think sometimes the difference between if this was a multifamily unit had been for years and it was changing into a medical office, there might be a lot of concerns and complaints about that because maybe the traffic is higher in that case. So I think sometimes you're worried about what might happen, but it is a nice neighborhood. And I think that you're all lucky to live there, and these additional 20 families and 68 single people who are mail carriers and child care workers will be happy to live there.
So I just want to make a couple of comments, probably one of which, I don't know, I tend to be somewhat controversial. So first, I want to say, and this is maybe a little difficult for me to say, but I don't think you can say you're in favor of low-income housing and in the same breath say not in my neighborhood. These are people that are our neighbors, that are people in our city. They are not necessarily people who don't care about where they live, but they cannot afford rents of $2,500, $3,500 to find a place where they can have their children there. And I think the presumption that folks who live in these units will not care or will somehow diminish the enjoyment of your neighborhood is a judgment that's unfair and that actually indicates you are not in favor of low-income housing. I also want to bring this back to say we as a commission have the authority tonight and are looking at 3 basic questions, which is not about parking. We can't make any decisions about that. As Commissioner Gent mentioned, some of that is more on the University of Utah. We are looking at these 3 questions. Density. And in density, the conversion of this from a non-conforming use to a potential residential use, that change means that they're exempt from density limitations. And so we're looking at this and we're trying to approve, whether they can have this density adjustment or not. We're looking at a building height request that we allow them to have 5 additional feet of building height in order to mask mechanical hardware at the top of the building. Without that additional height, those mechanical facilities would be visible and would not necessarily be an addition, a positive addition to the skyline or the area that you're living in. And we're looking at adjustments to yards and setbacks, some of which actually are going to improve what the yards and setbacks are at this time. And frankly, looking at the plans, this developer is maintaining some very large setbacks on areas of the property. Those are the only 3 things that we have the ability to even address. And so we welcome your concerns. We're very glad you come to speak up. But I think keep in mind, this is the limit of what we're looking at tonight. Otherwise, the project is already gone through the steps they need to go through for approval.
And I'd like to add, just for the commission and Commissioner Gale's comment earlier about the design of projects, we actually have no control over that. Even though I think that the design of this project is not respecting the modern building and its history. A 1970 building is already 50 years old, which qualifies it for historic building. So
I wanted to say if there are problems in your neighborhood, you should call code enforcement every time on them. If you have problem neighbors, good luck with it. I swear I'm not a Karen, but I must call code enforcement more often than anyone else within miles for potholes or rats or fireworks or whatever else there is. But that shows that you do care about your neighborhood, and that's the method that we have to kind of address that right now. So good luck. It's a beautiful neighborhood. I would love the building to look as much like it does right now because I think it's interesting too. Nice looking. So I'm ready to make a motion.
I just have a comment.
Oh,
That's
sorry.
okay, Commissioner Burrows. I just want to make a comment about the design. I generally dislike about 85% of what comes before us, so I rarely have anything good to say about design. I will say, though, I think it is appropriate that you are making certain changes and some modifications because the use is changing. I don't know anybody who would want to say, like, yeah, I live in a medical office building. right? I think it's appropriate that it is somewhat changing to reflect that different use. So I think it has a lot of good features that way, and I commend your effort on that.
I'll make a motion. Based on the information presented in the staff report and the discussion here, I move that the commission approve this application based on staff's recommendation.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion from Commissioner Burrows and a second from Commissioner Tuttle.
May I make a friendly amendment or attempt to? I would amend that we should list the conditions that are to be modified, that the staff has recommended that we include, which I am scrolling down to find it. One, that the final approval of plans be delegated to planning staff to ensure compliance with zoning standards and conditions of approval, including off-street loading, signage, lighting, and landscaping. And two, that approval for the specific items discussed and identified in the staff report and all other applicable zoning regulations and requirements from other city departments still apply.
I'll take that.
Okay. In that case, we'll go ahead and vote. Commissioner Scheer.
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows.
Yes.
Commissioner Gent.
Yes.
Commissioner Berry.
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle.
Yes.
Commissioner Gale.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. That passes unanimously. Okay. We'll give everyone a second to clear out. Okay, we will move on to, wow. We'll go ahead and move on to item number 2. 21 on 9th rezone at approximately 1380 South, 900 West. Case number PLN PCM 2023-00172.
All right, thank you. Aaron Barlow worked on this project, but he had another meeting he had to go to tonight, so I'll be presenting for him. This is a zoning map amendment for the property located at 1380 South, 900 West, 1361 South, 10th West, and 1367 South, 10th West. The proposal is to rezone the properties from R17 single family residential to RMF 30 low density multifamily residential. Here's just a photo of the existing conditions on the site. And this shows the location of the property, or the properties I should say. They're between 9th and 10th West and just south of California Avenue. And the Sorensen Community Center is just to the east of this property across 900 West. Some of you may or may not remember the Planning Commission reviewed a plan development for the properties here at 1361 and 1367. I think it was about a year ago, and it was a plan development to build 2 single-family homes, 1 property without street frontage. That was approved. I believe the developers are planning to move forward with that the development of those 2 single-family homes, but they are actually being included in this rezone because there may be the possibility that they are needed for access to get to 1380, and because the proposal is to build single-family attached at 1380, they would need to rezone 1361 and 67 to the same zoning so we can make sure the access meets the zoning regulations. So the purpose of this rezone is to provide an opportunity to build more housing on the property. The applicants have submitted a concept plan, and that's in the staff report. But that is just a concept plan at this point, so really you're reviewing the zoning proposal and determining if you feel that RMF 30 is appropriate at this site. So to provide a little bit of background on what's anticipated in this area through the master plan, the property in question is this little yellow star over here. It's within the West Side Community Master Plan area, and it's also located within the California Avenue 900 West Community Node. Just a little note, zoom in on this a little bit. The circles aren't hard and fast lines as far as they don't follow property lines. It's just kind of a general area that characterizes the particular node areas. So the master plan states that for community nodes, they're generally characterized by multifamily residential with 20 to 30 dwelling units per acre, and then small scale neighborhood supportive commercial uses. So we'll get back to the zoning a bit. Again, property shown in red. This block is currently zoned R1 7000 single family residential. So if the property was changed to RMF 30, what that difference means is that, with the R1 7000 zone, it is predominantly single family land uses only. Oops, sorry. Too many computer screens going on, sorry about that. Whereas the RMF 30 zone allows a lot more residential land use categories like multifamily, duplexes, townhomes, and things like that. The RMF 30 zone also allows a little bit more building height. The R17 zone is limited to 28 feet. RMF 30 allows up to 30 feet in height, so it's a couple more feet. Also, the setbacks are smaller, and the required lot size is smaller, so it does allow more density in the RMF 30 zone. Really, one of the big differences between the single-family zone and our new RMF 30 zone are the design regulations. In the single-family zones, we really don't have much in the way of design regulations. You really just need to put a front door and a window along the street frontage. One of the things the city did when the new RMF 30 zone was adopted was and developed was really paying attention to to design and how the buildings were interact with the street frontage. So the new RMF 30 regulations have a lot more of those design requirements, such as requiring durable materials, minimum amount of glass, and a limitation on blank walls along the street frontage. So staff reviewed the proposal, according to the policies in the various city master plans, and found that the project is consistent with the West Side Master Plan, with the citywide general plan, Plan Salt Lake, and with the Salt Lake City Housing Plan. So after consideration of all the factors associated with zoning amendments, staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward on a recommendation of approval to the City Council. The applicants are here, and they have a presentation that's teed up here.
Let's have the applicants go ahead and come forward. State your names for the record, and you'll have about 10 minutes.
My name is Jordan Atkin. I'm with the applicant. My name is Drake Powell, and I'm also with the applicant, TAG SLC. I think Wayne did a pretty good job covering most of the topics that are in our presentation, so I'm just going to kind of skip ahead and show you guys what our anticipated site plan is. So right now, sitting on the lot, it's about an acre lot, and there's a single family home that's been deemed uninhabitable due to a fire that was in the basement. There's also a bunch of underutilized yard in the back, and we think that this is a great place for this project. Here's our 3 and 4 unit concepts. We're still really early in design, but we wanted to bring, because we've been hearing from the community, this body, and City Council, that there's a strong desire for family-sized units. So we wanted to deliver a 4-bed, 2.5 bath with 2-car garage unit that would be for sale to promote individual home ownership. This is also just touching on the other 2 parcels that are included in our application. They were included by the original applicant as an access easement. It is currently, they're in construction right now. It's 2 single-family homes with a mother-in-law. And by continuing the rezone, we'll still be able to have this access, and they could be classified as duplexes, making it easier for homeowners and families to finance.
And that's everything.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. So can you expand a little bit more on how are you going to utilize access if we're already constructing, so they're already being built? How would you get access from that side in those properties, since you're not coming at this with a clean slate, right?
Yeah, sorry, I guess I didn't phrase that correctly. We're using it as a utility access easement and not a drive aisle access.
Utility access, thank you.
Yeah, I'll add to that. When we originally started contemplating the project, we did think that we would continue the road all the way from 9th West to 10th West. And as we got in a little bit more into the design development, by needing to curve up so that we could do a double loaded drive, which is a lot more efficient, it didn't really seem best to connect. And by stopping it and using this hammerhead, we also freed up quite a bit of green open space toward the rear of the property. And then when we went back to the group who we did some consulting for on 10th West for their subdivision, and we talked about that, they requested that we continue to leave their parcels as part of our applications. Attempt to move forward with them as duplexes.
Thank you, Jordan. And then I just have a question for staff, Wayne, and this is really just to get it on the record and to clarify, because we have a concept before us, and that's great, but any future actual development, this would end up being a planned development and would still have to come back before the Planning Commission. Correct.
More than likely.
Yes.
But it depends on what the final plan is. I mean, there's a possibility they could do something that meets the code.
Yeah. So if we have lots without street frontage, that would come back before us to the Planning Commission. So the concept is good. It's nice to have that, but I just want to put that on the record for the public as well, that we're not really approving this tonight either.
I can jump in. Sorry. I was one of the project managers for RMF 30. There are some provisions that allow lots without street frontage, without Planning Commission approval in this context. So it's depending on how they design their project, they could meet the new RMF 30 code without Planning Commission approval.
Well, that's good to know. I think that is such a new zone that I appreciate you highlighting that for us. Thank you.
Any other questions? We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there anyone present who would like to speak on this item? It doesn't look like anyone is here, so any emails?
Yes, Aaron received 2 phone calls this afternoon, and I think they were added to your Dropbox after 4 p.m., so I'm going to just read them into the record. These 2 individuals were unable to attend the meeting this evening. The first reads as the follows. My name is Gabriel Lyons, and I am 100% against rezoning this property to multifamily units. I would be attending the meeting if I was able to walk. The traffic is already bad on 900 West, and there will be so much congestion that nobody will be able to get into our street, parentheses 1400 South. With only 600 square feet on the main floor of the proposed units, they would have to go up 3 or 4 stories. There would be no privacy in our homes or yards. The parking on 1400 South is already bad. When they have soccer games at the school, you can hardly go down the street when cars are parked on both sides. With the apartments being built, there will never be any parking in front of our homes. I don't think these people who would park on 1400 South would like their cars towed, because I, for one, will have the police on speed dial and have the cars towed. Also, on Thursday mornings, where are we supposed to put our garbage cans if cars are parked in front of our homes? It's bad enough now if people have company. It will be impossible later on if the property is developed. Our taxes are already going up because of the value of our homes. Most of us are low-income working people with more homes that are multifamily nearby. It would drive us out, and there would be no place for us to go. Please take this into consideration and think about the little people that live here in Salt Lake City. Thank you very much. The next one is from Julie Foster at 923 West, 1400 South. I am calling about the meeting for the rezone by my house. The time of the meeting isn't convenient for me. I'm opposed to changing the zoning on this property. We will not know how many cars will come with the 24 new units. I don't want them parking on the street. We don't want any more traffic or accidents in our neighborhood. We do not need any more riffraff in our community. There's also a drug problem on California Avenue. The son of a friend of mine was mistaken for another person and killed near my house. There was also a drunk driver that hit and killed an infant when a lady and her son were waiting to cross the street. I am also worried about the privacy of my yard when the new apartment buildings are finished. Please find another property that isn't already residential. I am just trying to live and survive. More apartments will make my taxes go up, and I am retired. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission.
I think it's interesting that the comments on this project are that their property values will go up, so their taxes will go up. And on the last project, it was our property values will go down. And we don't like either one. Nobody likes anything to change. But I think if you really are having a hard time paying your property taxes, there really are tax holiday kind of, there are lots of provisions, and the county treasurer can help you figure that out if you have a hard time with your property taxes. So please do, because nobody wants someone to lose their house because of that. Well, I don't think anyone on this planning commission wants that to happen. I want to say I really appreciate that professionalism and how on the ball you guys all are with people presenting other people's projects and being able to answer the questions. In that case, I appreciate that. So we have a really good planning commission here who think of a lot of things. I have a quick question. If this little whale tail that you're envisioning, I realize that's not the thing that we're approving today, but does that go to an alley somewhere that I just don't see?
So that's actually not an alley. It's a hammerhead turnaround
it just
for
stops.
for fire access. Yeah,
That's
there'll be
it.
a fence at the end of that.
Okay. It's a huge property. That's a huge house that's already there. It's in a nice place with the Sorensen Unity Center across the street. It looks like a nice place to have RMF 30 type housing. I feel like the buildings in that zone can't be that much taller than the residential buildings that are already there. It's like 28 feet versus 30 feet. So there won't be like a viewing tower on this property, whatever it turns out to be. It's not like a fire, like a wildlife fire tower. It'll be appropriate maybe for the size of the buildings that are already there. So I like it.
I guess I just want to address a couple of the things that came up in the public comments. On the property taxes going up, I understand that can be challenging. For the person who said they were a retiree, if you listen to this on YouTube later, reverse mortgages are a great option in these circumstances to sort of be able to afford, as your property values go up, you actually can get money out to pay those taxes. And the other thing, the parking, I don't spend enough time in this neighborhood, in all honesty, to understand the parking issues, but I wonder whether permit parking might be, if it's really as congested as people suggest, whether permit parking, so we have that in some of our neighborhoods. I don't know whether we're at that point in that neighborhood, but just something to consider whether the community council wants to sort of ask that we make this a permit parking neighborhood, or whether that's a question for staff.
Yeah, that's a transportation call. So I would just recommend the residents that are concerned about on-street parking reach out to transportation to see if they qualify for permit parking.
But with each unit having 2 parking spaces is probably not going to be a big issue.
There's also the comment that we heard last time that building for peak usage is folly, which I thought was interesting. When there's a soccer game at the school across the street, which isn't it great to have all these people who live right across the street from a school, that there's not parking, in which case call the police if those people are parked illegally. I hope after every one of these meetings, code enforcement gets like a cajillion calls about complaints about how we can fix the neighborhoods that we live in. But I think when I have been there and when I was there today, it seemed like a great neighborhood, perfect place for more families to live.
Mr. Chair, I'm ready to make a motion. Based on the information presented in the discussion, I move that the commission recommend that the city council approve this zoning map amendment.
I'll second that.
We have a motion from Commissioner Scheer and a second from Commissioner Berry. We'll go ahead and vote. Commissioner Gale.
Yes.
Commissioner Berry.
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows.
Yes.
Commissioner Scheer.
Yes.
Commissioner Gent.
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle.
Yes.
And the chair also votes yes. That recommendation is unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 3 after. started. Okay, item number 3 is rezone at approximately 680 South Gladiola Street. Case number PLN PCM 2023-00236.
Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, this is a another zoning map amendment request. Just as you said, 680 South Gladiola Street. The proposal is to rezone from M2 heavy manufacturing to M1 light manufacturing. The reason for the request is that the applicant would like to open a truck driving school, and in the which is considered a vocational school in the M2 zoning district, that's not permitted, and so the applicant is requesting M1 in order to do so. Give a little overview of the area here. It's right along a Union Pacific Railroad corridor, just south of I-80 and east of Bangerter Highway. Property is located in the Northwest Quadrant Master Plan, and you can see it's that little red triangle sliver there. It's right along the edge in the Northwest Community Master Plan is what's identified as heavy industrial. So a close-up of the area. In the master plan, the heavy industrial talks about promoting infill of underutilized property for manufacturing and industrial uses, for supporting the businesses in the area. And there's really in the master plan, it doesn't specifically say what zoning district should, what zone these properties should be. Currently, they are zoned the heavy manufacturing, but rezoning to M1 light manufacturing, staff believes it's still in line with the master plan. The light manufacturing zone still allows or manufacturing type uses, that also allows uses that support those manufacturing uses. Just provide a quick little summary of the difference between the M1 and M2 district. The M2 district allows really heavy industrial uses, and quite often those occur outdoors, whereas the M1 allows industrial uses, but with some of the lower impacts, with most things occurring outdoors, some things allowed inside, or I'm sorry, outdoors, most of them indoors. There's a couple of differences in the, smaller lot sizes are allowed in the M1 district, lower height in the M1 district, and some smaller setbacks in the M1 because typically they're lower impact uses. As far as the rest of the development standards go, pretty identical. After consideration of the factors for zoning map amendments, staff analyzed the project according to those factors and recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval to the City Council. I am not sure.
Thank you.
If the applicant is here.
So the applicant isn't present.
No, I've never met the applicant, but he doesn't
Okay.
look like the applicant is here.
We will, I guess, move on to questions if anyone has any. And it looks like we don't have any questions, so we will open up the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this item? And since it doesn't look like anyone wishes to speak and we don't have any emails, we'll go, well, we do have one. Yeah, you can go ahead and approach the microphone and you'll state your name for the record and you'll have 2 minutes.
Robert Miller. I own 2 parcels of property just to the northwest, a total of 37 acres. Our business is recycling asphalt and concrete, topsoil. We chose this place because Western Metals Recycling is right next to us. Waste Products, Waste Management's right next to us. We were in Murray, or actually right on the edge line of Salt Lake County, in a heavy industrial M2, and all of a sudden, we saw apartments and more apartments and got booted out, which was a blessing having this piece of property. We bought this one, and it's larger. We had 7 acres before, now we have, and I just purchased the last 12. That's right on Gladiola, and my plan was to clean the pile up that's been there for 30 years or more. I'm in the paving construction business, so I was aware of that pile, and we're slowly going to work through it. In a year, we'll have that pile down to bare ground. Just hate seeing people, I want to stay M2, and I want the people around us to be M2 or get along with the M2 properties that are there. So, and we probably do 500,000 ton of recycling, that concrete that's being brought in and on our roads today. And so, yeah, instead of tearing up our mountains, they're taking what was in the mountains, bringing it to us, and we're turning it into an inch minus material and selling it back as road base and gravel. So I don't mind having neighbors. I just don't want them to kick me out.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to give public comment? We'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission.
I'll just make a comment. Because the property south is currently M1, this feels appropriate. That it's not going to be a conflicting use with the M2. It feels like those two can go together. I also feel like this is such an odd-shaped parcel that no heavy manufacturing in an M2 could possibly utilize this in a way that would benefit them unless the neighboring property purchased it, because it's so small. And so I don't see a trend for this area to then become rezoned into something that would be incompatible with M1 or M2. So I'm in favor of recommending the rezone to the city council.
I'm prepared to make a motion. I move that based on the information presented and our discussion, that the commission recommend that the city council approve this zoning map amendment.
We have a motion from Commissioner Gale and a second from Commissioner Scheer. Any discussion to the motion? We will go ahead and vote then. Commissioner Tuttle.
Yes.
Commissioner Gent.
Yes.
Commissioner Scheer.
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows.
Yes.
Commissioner Berry.
Yes.
Commissioner Gale.
Yes.
And the chair also votes yes. And that recommendation passes unanimously. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next item, item number 4, which is the alley vacation at approximately 1518 South, 300 West. Case number PLN PCM 2023-00408.
Michael, I don't think your mic is on.
There we go. Sorry about that. Okay. Good evening. Thank you for stopping me before I just went through the whole presentation. This is a request to vacate 2 public alleys in the vicinity of 1518 South, 300 West. The request is to fully vacate both alleys. One of the alleys travels north to south between Andrew Avenue and the other alley. This alley will be referred to as Alley A. The other alley travels east to west between 300 West and the east side property line of 352 West Van Buren Avenue. This alley will be referred to as Alley B. Staff is recommending the commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council with conditions. The alleys are located west of 300 West between Andrew and Van Buren Avenues. They were dedicated to the city in 1890 as part of the Stewart's Addition subdivision. A large portion of Alley B has already been vacated, as shown on the slide. 400 West, which used to connect Andrew and Van Buren on the west side of the block, was vacated in 1973. The property surrounding the alleys is in the CG General Commercial Zone. It is located in the Central Community General Plan area, as well as the Ballpark area, small area plan. Alley A, the north-south alley, is 16.5 feet wide by 148 feet 7 inches long. And the remainder of Alley B, the east-west alley, is 16.5 feet wide by 290 feet 8 inches long. Alley A appears to be paved, but a gate was installed likely at some point after 2019, which blocks public access. The alley is primarily used as parking area for an adjacent auto repair business. Alley B is gravel and has unobstructed access between 300 West and where it intersects with Alley A. To the west of Alley A, it has also been fenced off and appears to be used as outdoor storage and parking. The gravel also appears to be deteriorating beyond this point. The gate appears to have been added at some point between 2019 and 2021, based on satellite images. Andrew and Van Buren Avenues are both very narrow streets at approximately 33 feet wide. Currently, only a small portion of Andrew has a sidewalk, while Van Buren does not have one at all. Because 400 West was vacated, Van Buren is a dead-end street, resulting in a low level of connectivity. Most of the surrounding development is heavy commercial or auto-oriented. However, a new multifamily building is being constructed on the other side of Andrew at the corner with 300 West. The applicant is also proposing to redevelop the property surrounding the alleys, which will be discussed in a later slide. Alley A and the portion of Alley B proposed to be closed in this application were the subject of a quiet title lawsuit in 2022. A court issued a judgment granting title to the applicant, but since the city was not named or served with the lawsuit, the judgment is not binding on the city. Nevertheless, once this judgment was recorded with Salt Lake County, the alleys were mistakenly identified by the county as belonging to the applicant. To clarify that the alleys remain city property unless and until the City Council grants this alley vacation application, and to create a mechanism for the alleys to be conveyed to the city in the event this application is denied in whole or in part, the applicant signed a notice of public alleys, which was included as attachment D. And that is being held in escrow by the city attorney's office pending a decision on the application by the City Council. The applicant owns all of the property surrounding the two alleys, and they are proposing to redevelop the site. They currently have design review and plan development applications in with the Planning Division for our review. And as proposed, the development would cover the entirety of the site except for the 10-foot building setback that is required on all sides from the outside property line. In order to accomplish this, the alley vacation is necessary. The rendering shown on this slide is preliminary, and the applicant has not yet finalized their plans. It should also be noted that the development project is not part of the alley vacation application, and the commission is not making a decision on the redevelopment today. In reviewing the application, staff used the standards in Chapter 1452 of the City Ordinance. These list policy considerations for vacation of alleys, as well as standards to consider when making a recommendation to the Planning Commission. To dive into more depth about the request, first, the applicants are asking to fully vacate Alley A, the north-south alley. Alley A currently helps to break up the block, which is pretty long at about 759 feet from 300 to 400 West. However, it does not provide a connection between Andrew and Van Buren Avenues. Staff feels that a better treatment for this block could be to vacate Alley A and replace it with a mid-block connection that fully connects Andrew and Van Buren. This could also provide for a placement of the connection that breaks up the block in a more even way than Alley A currently does, hoping to make Van Buren feel more connected to the surrounding streets despite being a dead end. If it were replaced with a full mid-block connection, vacating Alley A would meet policy consideration C from 1452-020, urban design. And staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council regarding the vacation of Alley A with these two conditions. One, a development agreement must be secured, ensuring that a mid-block connection will be created between Andrew and Van Buren Avenues in exchange for vacating the alley. And a public access easement must also be secured, ensuring public access to the private right-of-way. The applicants are also requesting to fully vacate Alley B, the east-west alley. Alley B used to be much longer, connecting to 400 West on the west side of the block. However, most of Alley B has already been vacated, starting in 1973 and then again in 1997. It is no longer serving its original purpose and is not providing much additional connectivity to the block. To the west of Alley A, the alley is fenced off and used for outdoor storage and parking. This portion of the alley meets policy consideration A, lack of use. The entirety of Alley B breaks up the block in an uneven way, creating a rectangular site on its south side that is nearly 300 feet long on the Van Buren side, while only being 56 feet wide on the 300 West side. Vacating the alley would lead to a better use of the block overall, which meets policy consideration C, urban design. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council regarding the vacation of Alley B, with one condition, that the applicant shall not purport to convey the property encompassing any portion of the alleys until at least 60 days after final decision by the City Council on the petition. And it was on the previous slide, but I should also mention that we wanted to apply that condition to Alley A as well. Vacating the alleys and replacing Alley A with a new mid-block connection generally complies with the applicable adopted plans. The Central Community Plan does not list preserving alleys as a priority in this area, but it does recommend that easements for mid-block connections be obtained where possible. The Ballpark Plan lists a goal of utilizing existing alleys for pedestrian and bicycle connections. However, the existing alley configuration does not provide good connectivity, so replacing them with something that does better meets that goal. Plan Salt Lake echoes the Central Community Plan, recommending increasing connectivity through mid-block connections. As part of this application, a public engagement process was conducted. Staff sent mailed notice of the application to property owners and tenants within 300 feet, and an online open house page was posted. Notification was also sent to the Ballpark Community Council. No comments have been received on the proposal at this time. So based on the information in the staff report, planning staff recommends that the Planning Commission send a positive recommendation to the City Council with the two conditions that were discussed previously. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions once the applicant has had a chance to present.
Let's go ahead and have the applicant come up. State your name for the record, and you'll have 10 minutes.
Yes, my name is Jared Hall. I'm the architect on the project and the applicant. I just want to give a little sort of broader context for the street network here and why we feel the alley vacation is best achieving the city goals here. So this is a map that shows the streets as they exist right now, as you can see. So there's where our parcels are, as you can see to the west of our parcel or the left on this map. 400 West does not continue through. So Van Buren is a long dead-end street, and Andrews continues through but is in great need of repair as you get down to that corner. As Michael showed, this is the approximate location of the existing alleys. As you can see, they're not providing the connectivity that is the hope for these. And then we are hoping to do an access on our very west side, which gets as close as we can to providing some connection down at the end of Van Buren. And with there's not really a good viable way to get a connection any further west on future projects. So we're trying to get that connection as far down the block as we can. And that's all I have, and I'm open for questions.
So I have a clarifying question, because that's the railroad track easement that's running through there, right?
My understanding is it used to be, but it's all private property now.
Oh, it's all private property, because the track is still there on,
Like
not
if you-
Andrew, but the other one.
If you look north of 1500, it is no longer there at all.
Yeah, it's no longer there on Whitney, but then it is there on the other side of the car wash. Like, it's still physically there. So I wasn't sure if that was still an active easement. Okay, thank you.
Can you clarify if we're talking about this same mid-block connection? Because it looks different on your map than his map.
You mean what's shown on the
Yeah.
screen?
So this is the current alleys in red right there. And what we are proposing is to vacate those alleys and have this as a new public access easement across the property.
And so I do want to clarify that that's what the applicant is proposing. The city council, if they chose to go this route, would negotiate exactly where the mid-block connection was, and what it could look like.
Does it, whether they continue the existing one straight through or move it over there to the west side of the property, does that make a difference to your recommendation? Either place still meets your findings?
I think either. Did you?
Sorry, was that a loud no? This mid-block connection is recommended for the north-south, not the east-west. And so,
Right.
Yeah, it's
Right.
a little bit different. And so we're recommending approval on both vacations with the caveat that they enter into a development agreement to move that, what would have been an alley, a mid-block connection, somewhere on the property. The proposal up on your screens is what the applicant is suggesting, like their ideal location.
Are we okay with, does it make a difference to us?
As far as
Is that not a thing that we can decide right now, whether they just continue the existing alley through? That's what I was expecting. Maybe I missed it, but this is the first time I've seen that moving.
Yeah, it's a bit of a different recommendation. We typically say yay or nay with alley vacations, but we felt as staff, given the substantially large development that the applicant is proposing, if these alley vacations are approved, we felt that it was appropriate to keep a mid-block connection due to the residential development that's going in on Andrew and then this new residential development.
To talk about this from a standpoint of urban design, if the alley is actually where Alley A is located now, but it all goes all the way through, that allows there to be a frontage on both sides of that alley, that is apartments or buildings and so forth. So you have a little street there that is really kind of the idea of mid-block walkways, that they are occupied, they have some, it's not just for cars to get from A to B. So I would say that putting it on the edge of the property means that it's not actually going to have that functionality. That's just from my perspective, and I think, that's just from my perspective.
And then is there already an agreement being held in escrow right now? Does that define whether it's the continuation of Alley A or it's over on the west side of their property? I mean, isn't that already described in that quit claim or whatever it is?
No, that's a separate.
That's different.
Yeah, that addresses the quiet title claim. So the staff recommendation for the mid-block connection was kind of purposefully not specific about where in the block that connection would be located. I don't know that we were necessarily picturing it being along the edge of the property, because I think we were hoping that it would break up the development, because it is proposed to be pretty large. But the final agreement would be negotiated by the city council, so that's why we were not specific about where we wanted it to go.
I feel like I usually hate alley vacations, but I like this one making a mid-block walkway, but I kind of like the way that Commissioner Scheer described it better than at the edge. Like it's a replacement for a road instead of a mid-block, breaking up alley. That's what I think.
I guess I have a couple questions. I've spent a lot of time in this area. I won't even take my bike down Andrew Avenue. Like, that's the state of how industrial this area. So maybe I'm just not seeing the vision of the value of a mid-block walkway here. This is not on the applicant, or there is a problem with people driving quickly onto the 300 West bike lanes because they don't recognize them as bike lanes. Maybe you'd put in a speed bump or something to alert the people who live in that complex. But my concern with the development agreement, in addition to my just not seeing the vision of how a mid-walk blockway would sort of serve the needs of the community down here, I don't know how long it takes to get that on city council's docket. Like, I don't know, sometimes when we send things to city council, I don't want to delay this development. I don't know what stage it's at, whether he's got financing lined up, or I don't want to delay it for city council to sit on this for 6 months or a year while we get a development agreement in place for what is so how long do you think it would take city council to agree to this?
Hi. I can jump in. I think there's some odd claims going around the community and maybe the development community that development agreements take years. Maybe they did in the early 2000s. We're relatively quickly, we process them really quickly these days. The developer would work with council staff on some conditions, and then it would go to the attorney's office, some final review, but typically a few months is my guesstimate. It's not years like you hear from public comments. As far as your comments about Andrew Avenue, I'm not sure if the commission remembers, but there was a fairly large development approved on Andrew Avenue, and that street will be redeveloped as part of that. So Andrew will be looking very different in the coming years, and it's going to be quite active with a number of residential units going on that property that y'all approved, and then with this development in the future.
And I think this is also part of we're currently studying a rezoning for 300 West, and so this is part of that area, and so in the future, the zoning might look a lot different.
And I think a mid-block walkway that actually serves to divide the property would be a benefit. When it comes back, we are looking at these very, very long facades that we don't like very much, and that would sort of automatically help to break that up. Also, a mid-block walkway is not just for people in the neighborhood, it's for people in the project itself that can have more entrances and more activity in the project. So I would like to propose that we do specify that there be room at least for one building to the west of the mid-block walkway.
So Commissioner Scheer, I think you're getting ahead of our discussion. We're in the question phase. We haven't even opened the public.
It's still okay. Make a suggestion. Thank you.
Remember.
But thank you for
I wrote it down.
keeping me honest.
Well, looks like we have no further questions. We will open up the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this item? It doesn't look like we have. Oh, well, let's have you go to the microphone, and you'll get 2 minutes. And also state your name for the record.
I'm Riley Rogers. I'm actually working with Jared. So there is a development to the west happening in the future as well. The other owners, people that own that land are going to develop that as well. I don't know when they're doing that, but that is their intention. Oh, my apologies. Thank you. So yeah, just wanted to pass that along so that was known.
Thank you. Anyone else like to give public comment? Any emails? We'll go ahead and close the public hearing then and bring it back to the commission.
I really feel like if for like value traded kind of thing, that it makes sense for it to be a real mid-block walkway instead of the break between two properties, two projects, because those are going to have like setbacks and landscaping and all that kind of stuff. So I really would rather have it be where Alley A is right now, or somewhere around there. I mean, if it's flexible, like if Commissioner Scheer's suggestion is legal, I like that. I like that too.
I'm just going to make the comment that given the presumption that I think we all know that this whole area is changing rather quickly, which I have chagrined that 300 West just got finished and now it's getting ripped up again for all of these developments. I'm in this area multiple times a week, so I feel this pain, but I think the location of this mid-block walkway becomes more important given as multifamily and developments happen surrounding it. And what we would like to recommend to the City Council to look at in terms of a vision of what to accomplish to bring connectivity to this area, because it's going to vastly change. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to make things really vibrant with design, and I know you can do that. So I also agree with like the thoughts of Commissioner Scheer of what could happen here. I think it's appropriate for us to make a recommendation to the City Council to think about its placement, make it a little bit more focused and less vague than the motion conditions state. I would be in favor of that, but not necessarily dictating exactly where it goes, but that it, I don't know the wording. Commissioner Scheer can probably, make a better change to that condition for the City Council to review.
Okay, then. Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion. If we've decided. Have we decided? Okay. Let me go back to the place where those things are. Okay. Motions. Okay. I move. Well, this is not quite the motion sheet we need here. I move that the commission, okay, on the east-west alley identified in the staff report as Alley B, based on the information presented and the discussion, I move that the commission send a positive recommendation to the City Council with the following condition listed in the staff report. On the north-south alley identified in the staff report as Alley A, based on the information presented in the discussion, I move that the commission send a positive recommendation to the City Council with the following conditions. A development agreement must be secured, ensuring that a mid-block walk connection be created between Andrew and Van Buren Avenue in exchange for vacating the alley. A public asset, the location of this mid-block connection should serve at least 2 buildings on the applicant's property. On either, is that correct? No, that's not gonna get it. Strike that. The location of the mid-block connection will be flexible, but there should be buildings on both the east side and west side of the property that the applicant owns. And 2, the applicant shall not purport to convey the property encompassing any portion of the alleys until at least 60 days after a final decision by the city council on the petition. And I also forgot on number 1, a public access easement must also be secured, ensuring public access to the private right-of-way. Is that?
I would say there needs to be a building on east side and west side of the mid-block connection.
That is kind of what I said. Yes.
I said property, but it's connection.
Okay, you're right. Building. Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Scheer and a second from Commissioner Burrows. Any more discussion to the motion?
Can I also state that requirement that we discussed here is a requirement to make it meet that urban design policy consideration. That's why we added that.
That is absolutely a friendly amendment. Thank you.
We will go ahead and vote. Commissioner Scheer.
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows.
Yes.
Commissioner Gent.
Yes.
Commissioner Barry.
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle.
Yes.
Commissioner Gale.
Yes.
And the chair also votes yes. That forwards a unanimous recommendation to City Council.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We will move on to item number 5. Zoning terms and definitions amendment, case number PLN PCM 2023-00194.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ben. This is my first time in front of y'all, so thank you for hopefully taking it easy on me. We'll see how it goes. Should be pretty easy.
Hey, Ben. Make sure you talk really close to the microphone.
Even closer?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the zoning terms and definitions amendment. This was a city-initiated amendment back in the early part of the year. It proposes to remove 21A60 completely and proposes a lot of amendments to 21A62040. The goal of this was for clarification and consistency throughout the code, as well as just removal of unnecessary language. There are also related amendments throughout 21A for that consistency's sake, and we'll get into those a little bit here. Again, 21A60, it is being removed entirely. It's nearly 760 terms at this point. It was initially used to help readers identify what terms are actually defined later in the code, but at 760 terms, it's just become unusable at this point. And whenever a planner goes in and makes an amendment that adds a definition to 21A62040, they also have to make an amendment to 21A60. It's just become a burdensome section of code at this point, and it has no longer serves its purpose. In terms of 21A62, there are a lot of definitions that are defined as, see definition of XYZ. And it just sends the reader on a never-ending search of multiple different definitions. It's not an effective and an efficient way of writing a city code. So we propose to remove every single one of those that says "see definition of." That one is eliminated completely. There are also numerous definitions that are just not used anymore within our code, and so we are proposing to remove those as well. In terms of providing clarity, one of the biggest issues we've come across is that within the FB code, FB is supposed to be measured from established grade, but for some reason we state where you should measure building height in definitions as well, and according to the definitions, FB zones are to be measured from finished grade. So depending on where you're looking in the code, it contradicts itself on where to measure that building height from. So we clarified that FB zones are to be measured from established grade, as the code says, not as the definition says. In terms of consistency, there's a lot of mention of buffer yards. Those buffer yards are supposed to be landscaped, so we added landscape buffer yard. Things like that, simple fixes that clarifies and makes the code consistent throughout. There are no zoning standards or land use changes impacted by this. All your zoning standards and land use permitted in conditional land uses, they're staying the same. Nothing is changing on that front. And the city staff recommends a positive recommendation to city council. And with that concludes my short presentation, and I'm open to questions if you have any.
Any questions from the commission? Seeing no questions, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. And it does not appear that there's anyone left in the audience to comment. So no emails. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion. First off, I'd like to say, Ben, this must have been just an amazingly fun project for you to work on.
You have no idea.
I can imagine. So thank you for your work on this. Based on the information presented and discussion, I move that the commission recommend that the city council approve this zoning text.
I second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Berry and a second from Commissioner Gale. And we'll go ahead and vote. Commissioner Gale.
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle.
Yes.
Commissioner Berry.
Yes.
Commissioner Gent.
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows.
Yes.
Commissioner Scheer.
Yes.
And the chair will also vote yes. And the chair is also glad that someone was willing to actually go through all that code.
It's like hazing the new guy.
Yeah.
Some would say.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Oh, you're welcome. And we will move on to our final item, which is a work session item, subdivision code amendment. And it is case number PLN PCM 2023-00494.
Eric, is your mic on?
No.
Thank you.
Do you want me to repeat that part?
Yes, please.
We're going to amend the subdivision code so we can be compliant with state code changes that require cities to update their codes by February 1st, 2024. So tonight's discussion is an introductory discussion about subdivisions. It's my intention to kind of give you a foundation about subdivisions and the process we go through to approve them. It's not entirely to explain every change that we're proposing. That will happen at another date. But we are going to talk about these things listed here, what changes are proposed, a little bit about the new state code standards, go over some basic subdivision topics, talk about the approval process, subdivision processes and standards, and the design standards. So looking at this, why are we making these changes? Again, first and foremost is to have uniformity with state code changes. We're proposing to kind of we're proposing to wipe the entire chapter clean and start over, and it reorganizes it into a more logical order. It updates the application requirements to put things more in line and make them clearer for the applicant, have them provide better information. It does make some minor modifications to the design standards to align with city goals and master plans, gets rid of outdated standards, and kind of brings more clarity to the code. So looking at the state code requirements, this is kind of a list of what they basically are. So our application materials now have to have a better checklist in there of exactly what's to be submitted for each type of subdivision application. And the list has to be referenced by city code as to where those standards are and why it needs to be provided. And then there's kind of what's been deemed a shot clock, and this is specific to single, two-family, and townhomes. And in a basic state, it requires that we review the application for completeness within 15 days. There's up to 4 review cycles allowed, and then can be more than 20 days. Those obviously are not. There's not too many of those in Salt Lake City. We don't have too many new subdivisions for single or two-family, or sometimes we have townhomes, but not as many. And then it requires review comments to be listed a certain way. We have to itemize them with referencing our code, and we have to provide them with the list of deficiencies and missing info so they can respond in a more timely and efficient manner. And we get 4 reviews, and after that, the plans just have to be accepted as is. So those are some of the new state code requirements. There is more burden also put on the subdivider to provide more specific response. Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand exactly what a review cycle constitutes. So if a staff member looks at it and says, we think this is a problem for XYZ reason, and they send it back to the applicant, does that constitute a review cycle?
Yes, and if it goes through, so when we do that, and we'll talk more about this, we send it all applicable city departments, they review it, we compile all the comments and send them back in one kind of package deal. That's one review cycle.
Okay, thank you.
They have the opportunity to respond.
Okay, so a lot of this would happen before we even see it. Now suppose it came to the
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
exactly.
Now suppose it came to the planning commission and we didn't like something and we voted to table. Mm-hmm. Is that a review cycle again?
That's a great question. We can clarify that. I think that's the approvals are a little bit different than the review cycles.
And we'll even talk about, there's very few times that you're ever going to see a subdivision. You're going to see I'll give you a sneak preview. You're going to see it with a planned development, and you're going to see it if there are like street dedications outside of the master plan, something like that, or if there's some major topic that's brought up of why there's a public reason for this to be re-examined, it's going to come to you. But beyond that, subdivisions will not come to the Planning Commission.
And when it says city must accept plans, I presume this is assuming that the subdivider has complied with all the things the city has asked of the subdivider?
Well, they have to respond. What that is referring to is we can't keep coming up with new things. We have to catch them before. They have to also respond. So that's the subdivider must respond to each review comment. If they haven't done it correctly, then we can put it back on them and say, you didn't answer this properly. You didn't provide whatever. That's not a review cycle. What this is saying is that we can't keep adding burdensome things and going, well, actually, we thought of this other thing after 4 review cycles. So I don't know that that's a problem in Salt Lake City. To be honest, these are not things that we see very often. Usually it's far less review cycles or something or other, but statewide, apparently that's been more of a problem. So,
is accepting a plan the same thing as approving a plan? Like, do we have to approve
No,
something
we
in the plan?
accept, yeah, and we'll look at that. I'll go through that process a little bit more, but no, we review an application for completeness. We make sure everything's there that needs to be. And after 1 review cycle, if something's still missing, they're going to know, and then we're going to lay that all out for them to supply. So that's, that's what a review cycle looks like. Okay, so just getting into some subdivision basics. They're fairly complex when it comes to the city review, and again, rarely do you see them, but of course, they regulate how land's divided. Up to 12 different divisions and departments review these at the city, and we're kind of all answering the same question, like, can the city provide services? And then does it meet the standards for streets, utilities, emergency access, zoning requirements? And then there's legal stuff with title and land ownership and things like that, easements and whatnot.
I'm just kind of trying to understand the broader context for these subdivisions. Suppose that I decided to buy up a bunch of agricultural land that was unincorporated. It was not part of the city. Does each county in the state of Utah also have subdivision requirements for unincorporated land?
So the state has subdivision regulations, and then, unincorporated land at the county level will have certain things. And this isn't necessarily dealing with annexations, which is different, but once something's brought into the city, then that's another layer is our local subdivision code. So the state doesn't have, they're not going to get into the detail we do with some of these things. So
And
Yeah,
if
I'm just
I
trying
can
to
jump
understand.
in, yes, counties, unincorporated counties do have their own subdivision section in their ordinances and in their land use codes.
right.
Thank you.
So
And they would have to comply with this law as well. So if I was trying to
Right.
build on unincorporated land in Wasatch County, Wasatch County's regulations would have to comply with this state law as well.
correct. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct. So in this process, they're submitting up to 9 different documents. They've got like 85 different standards. And we also look at like public improvement drawings, and there's construction agreements. So they're very involved processes that happen before there's ever talk of a building to be put on a piece of land. With this, one of the big pieces is with the public improvements. The initial installation of public improvements the burden is on the developer or the subdivider, and those include, storm drainage, curb, gutter, detention basins, all that kind of stuff, water supply lines, fire hydrants, streets, sidewalks, sewer, street trees, street lighting, all the, these amenities you see in the right of way or surrounding a property. those all have different standards that we review, and those are all put in place by the subdivider as part of this process. With that, I should also mention, so when they install them, they pay for it originally, they construct them, we inspect them, and then they're warrantied moving forward. So looking at the approval process, this is kind of as we were talking about earlier, most are staff level approvals. The only time really that they're going to come to the Planning Commission is first if it's part of a plan development, which of course is a subdivision that maybe doesn't meet the underlying zoning code. So we're looking at utilizing the land in a slightly different configuration or way. And then again, if there's like a public right-of-way that maybe isn't in line with master plans or something like that. Or the other thing is, again, is if there's some major community topic that's brought up by the public during the noticing period that warrants a greater discussion, then it could be brought to you as well, which I'll be honest, I don't know if I've seen that happen in my time here or elsewhere, so not too often. But we do send out noticing. There's it goes out to surrounding properties. It's a 21-day notice. And again, they're looking for potential impacts to somebody else's property, maybe with easements, private infrastructure, kind of big ticket items. So the basic process for subdivisions is we've got a preliminary subdivision process and a final. And the preliminary, we're looking at basic design standards, making sure it can be serviced with water, sewage, other infrastructure, storm drains, things of that nature. And we establish, condominiums, how the management plan for those would be regulated. And if they meet the basic requirements for a preliminary subdivision, then they must be approved. And so we'll issue an approval, and that allows them to move on to final. That's a far more technical review. With that, we look at the subdivision improvement agreements, public improvement construction drawings, and other dedications, things of that nature.
Quick question on this.
Sure.
These are reflecting the changes that will be made, so the vesting of entitlements is going to be a change to the city code?
No, this is just how we do things currently.
This is just
gonna
how you do it right
continue
now.
on. Yeah, the changes are really within kind of some standards and a few procedural things, but the basic format is going to stay the same. So this is just kind of giving an example, and I'll be honest, this is actually a pretty well done preliminary plat, but kind of looking at the detail, basic alignments of, where the properties are going to be, what the surrounding area is, making sure lots meet zoning dimension, basic layout and dimension, zoning requirements, things like that, and making sure public utilities can service the lot, see how the roads are going to be laid out and whatnot. Then a final plat is more along these lines, where we're going to have the signature boxes for each of the departments. It's far more technical, establishes all the easements, dedications, and we make sure everything is in place for a final subdivision. Again, this kind of shows the flow of how that works, moving through preliminary. Once we've granted preliminary approval, they'll go ahead, submit public improvement plans and construction agreements, and we start reviewing those internally and getting those things put in place. And then they can submit for the final plat. We review that. It's a far more technical review. Start collecting the signatures, and they move to recording. And that ensures they've met all requirements. There's all the legal requirements for title, owner signatures, each of the reviewing departments, the mayor, city recorder, and county recorder all sign this. Then, just for your information, there's a handful of other subdivision processes that we do. There's amendments to subdivision plats, condominium conversions, taking, perhaps a commercial building and turning it into residential units or something like that, or dividing up a building into condominiums. We do lot line adjustments between property lines, lot consolidations, eliminating lines between them, street dedication plats, which don't have any lots involved. They just create new streets or conversion of private streets. So those are all processes we go through, and each of those have specific requirements and whatnot, and that's all in the subdivision code. So it makes it very lengthy and technical. Looking at subdivision design standards, we've kind of talked about some of these. They're related to city utilities. I won't get into the specifics on these unless you're curious, or if you want to know more, we can talk about them more next time as well. About all the water, sewer, stormwater, and a lot of these are done by different departments in the city, right? Flood control standards, the connectivity with sidewalks, streets, things like that, and a lot of those are in the master plans, or there's certain dimensions, things for downtown. The street design themselves, widths and cross sections, and then we do have protection of natural features, but we do have a lot. There's a lot of new standards in there for that, just clarifying things, and there was some of that was in the state code, but other things that we did to just kind of protect streams, rivers, wetlands, wooded areas, wildlife habitats, and things like that. And then we have revised the standard for blocks. Some of you might remember we had some dilemmas with block sizes the standards were geared more towards this side of the city with small residential plots, and not out west with large commercial tracts, manufacturing tracts. So we've corrected all that. Again, created, it has a standard for lots and includes process for modifying these standards. So looking at this will be we're currently in the 45-day public input period. That goes until September 22nd. We're on a tight time frame, so we've got this a public hearing on this scheduled with this commission October 11th, and then we'll transmit as soon as possible. We need to get this to the city council so we can do work session and public hearing and that, and then try to get a decision by January 2024 so we can be in compliance with state code. If there are specific questions you want to go over, you want to understand certain things, I would recommend you maybe write them down or notify us so we can be prepared with the information you need or don't need, and so that we can be ready for the next, for the public hearing. We can make sure to include all that information. But that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Any
I have something. You want me to write it down or tell you right now?
Either way.
Okay. On natural features, I wonder if we talked about before, I wonder if that protects water aquifer recharge areas, because we talked about that before and it seems like that would be a good idea. What else is included? Like, are there special natural features in the foothills zones?
Yeah, and there's slope protections in the foothills as well. Slope protections, and I think there is recharge areas maybe as well. We can get back to you on the specifics of that. Like I said, it's a large code with a lot of aspects, but we can define that a little bit better.
Any more questions?
I don't really have I just have a comment because me. But I just would say, you know, if anyone thinks they want to really dig into this, you need to start sooner rather than later. These are very complex standards. There are very complex requirements on both the state and city level. Before you kind of start questioning things, I would encourage you to call the planning department and ask them how those requirements work together. I mean, this is something that working on subdivisions and all the accompanying documentation and requirements will take developers often, you know, several months to well over a year to work through. So the planning department are really going to be the experts on this. And if there are specific things that you think, oh, I'm really interested in this and interested in giving input, you're going to need to start looking at that sooner rather than later and not wait for a report to come out just right before the meeting.
And each of the city departments involved or divisions, they were participants in this code rewrite, so they are the experts at their sections, and they have written that in. And so again, it does get very technical, but we're happy to, you know, if you have specific questions or need some clarification on something, reach out to us, and we're happy to provide that.
I have another question. You said that there are lots of departments that comment on these subdivision things, like we see urban forestry and sustainability and police and public
engineering,
utilities, transportation,
yep,
all that kind of stuff. Same thing for subdivisions.
Yes, all of them.
And in the approval process, they also comment on everything that comes through. So not only are they commenting on this ordinance change, but they comment throughout the whole process.
Oh, we've also said, this group has also said that we like to see, as much as possible, the state requirements match the city ones as much as is reasonable for us. So it's not a additional.
Yeah, and we were already compliant with the vast majority of state code, of the new state code. So they made changes, and we were already doing the vast majority of it. So it was almost like they were catching up to where we already were in some extent there, and then a lot of their standards don't really affect us a lot, like those shot clocks. I don't foresee that being an issue in Salt Lake City. It's not something we encounter much, especially where most of them relate to single and two family. We just don't have those come through. So there's nothing here that caught us too off guard or that we weren't too prepared for, but a lot of it is clarifying and improving our own side.
Anecdotally, there seem to be some cities around the state that don't want to approve housing at sort of any cost. And I think that's what this law is directed at. And it's not us. We're not the target. There are some cities that will do whatever they can not to approve, especially anything that is like townhomes, but even single family. So I think that's the main target here, right?
Correct.
And counties. I mean, just to include them both. And we have some pretty remote, rural, unsophisticated places. So the state's trying to step in and give some guidance to help people stay on track in all those areas.
That actually answers the one question that I was wondering, which was what prompted the legislature to make those changes, and I was kind of assuming it was something along those lines.
So there's a long list in here of things that are required and so forth, and I'm wondering, is there any flexibility in that when once these are sort of put down in this law? That's it. There's no. We have to change the law in order to change it again. So what if we want to all of a sudden have
standards for
the location of our AI machine in the corner or whatever? Something that we can't anticipate now.
The standards, a lot of times, they're only applicable in certain circumstances. So that's part of our determination when we go through and review their application right up front. There are certain things that if they're subdividing a piece of land that's already in a pretty established area and they're making some changes, there's a lot of these things that are just not going to be applicable.
So you go through and
So-
sort of this one, this one, this one, this one,
Yeah.
this one, but not these 25.
Exactly, and that's
Okay.
that's one of the things we've done, but with it, that is actually one of the things the state's requiring is that we go through and make sure that we have documented, here is what's applicable to your request and here's what's not, and hand it to them so they know their standards, because the standards kind of do paint with a broad brush across everything, and they don't all apply everywhere. You know, a lot of the environmental standards
I
or
just
things
think
like
there
that.
might be standards that we don't have listed here. That might be something that would arise as a result of a greater concern. I mean, 20 years ago we weren't thinking about environmental stuff very much. So I'm just saying, there's new standards that have to do with new things that we're really concerned about.
Yeah, so the standards have to be listed. We cannot come up with new things, and that was also
my only
yeah, and that was
question,
also part of the state is saying you can't just come up with new things. So that's why we've been very proactive, combing through master plans, doing things, getting input from every division to make sure that all bases are covered. And of course, yeah, things eventually need revision and whatnot, but we feel confident we have covered all bases. We have it built in. We can accommodate all foreseeable scenarios.
And do these standards comport with the new landscape requirements that we have gone through here but have not gone through city council yet?
Yes, yeah, because what they do is they a lot of them reference specific zoning standards or things like that. So they point you to that you have to be compliant with those standards. So even as those change and are modified, they still have to be compliant with them.
So the zoning applies the zoning applies, as do the subdivision requirements. And I just want to say the checklist is going to be super helpful for folks. Another part of the reason that some of this legislation came through, I'm sure, as most of you know, Utah's a very pro-development state, and there can be, I'm not saying there have been in this city, but there certainly can be denials of subdivisions or approvals that are not based on any kind of legal footing, and then it causes a lot of time and a huge amount of money between the development of your preliminary plans, which likely should have been approved, through a final denial, through an appeal process with the county or city, through an appeal process at the courts. So all of this is intended to sort of grease the wheels on the whole process and ensure that developers who come in know exactly what they're going to be held to as they move forward.
So overall, do these changes make the standards more specific in total, or is there still a lot of the generally
they
meets the
do in the
standard?
sense that they clarify a lot. So there was some ambiguous language in the previous or current version. There was also things that were just not applicable anymore or hadn't been for quite some time. And so I think it just clarifies it, brings it in line, it's just a more appropriate fit. And yeah, the specifics, a lot of the specifics really do come down to specific engineering standards, things that are written elsewhere in code, things like that. So this is just helping direct to the right places. So the better our zoning code is, the better our engineering standards are, the better our master plans are, the better our subdivision code is at the same time.
Any other questions? Well, it looks like we can go ahead and adjourn and wrap up this meeting.
Congratulations on your first meeting as chair, Christensen.
Thank you.